Oh, that's it. Left time.
All right, good morning and welcome to DTN. It is 9:30, so why don't we get started? We have a couple of overview and chair slides to go through. Oh, if someone in the back could shut the door just in case we get extra noise coming in. So, welcome to IETF 120 and DTN. So that you know, these sessions are recorded and will be posted after the IETF on YouTube. We are Thursday, so most people have been here through most of the week. So just to note here, we are bound by all of our processes and policies and BCPs. Something to add. The ISG has asked all of our chairs to remind their working groups of the need for appropriate behavior. That is described, of course, because it's the IETF in BCP 54. But the summary is that we do expect people to be respectful and courteous to their colleagues all of the time, and that we do want to have impersonal discussions, and that we really need to focus on the quality of the technical solutions. Again, if you're looking for resources, the agenda is online. For the overall IETF as well as the DTN working group, the MEDEC and other information is here. Even if you are in the room, please make sure that you have joined using the in-room tool so that you can join the queue. Please do not come to the mic unless you have joined the queue. If you are unfamiliar with MEDEC, here's how it works. We do need someone who will agree to take primary notes, but we do ask that for the folks that are online and also here in the room, please make sure that you are taking those notes. And I see that Adam had volunteered for that. Thank you, Adam. The agenda slide seems to have been formatted incorrectly in the PDF conversion, but we do have a somewhat full agenda, but we're trying to save time at the end for additional discussion. We're going to go through the BPSec COSI security context status. We're going to talk a little bit about EID patterns, followed by an update to our network management work, and then a presentation of COAP over BP, followed by some updates on bundle and bundle encapsulation and its applicability for custody transfer. And what's at the bottom of the screen, which has just fallen off a bit, is a rechartering discussion around the fact that we are now in a new area, the internet area, and we may want to look at our existing charter and whether we want to include some things. There's 20 minutes for that, and we have 20 minutes of open mic at the end. So I think that we've really allocated a lot of time for these discussions. With that, any changes, updates, or requests for changes to the agenda? All right, Rick, anything else?
No, I think that's covered it. Thank you.
All right, so our first speaker is going to be Brian Sipos, who's going to talk us through BPSec and the COSI context. Brian, would you like me to share your slides or would you like to share your screen?
The slides should be accessible on the...
Use the tool. It's probably easier for everyone.
All right.
Yes.
We good?
Okay. So I'm going to be talking now about the draft COSE context for BPSec. Next slide, please. This is the same background as presented before, but I'll go through it really briefly. And the point is that this is meant to be a more full-featured and longer-term security context compared to the default security context, which were the kind of minimal implementation to prove out BPSec. One key aspect of COSE is that it currently is expanding support for PKI and PKI-X, and even in the near future, there's going to be support for compressed CBOR compressed certificates as well. And so the point here is to make use of this existing COSE mechanism in BPSec. Next slide, please. So there were a few editorial changes in the last revision of the document. We added minimum interoperability for a few different algorithms that were just missing. This doesn't change the behavior, but it just restricts, at the very least, you have to support these specific kind of algorithms. and allows single layer encryption for situations where you have a security association already established. One change related to ticket number 27 is the only one that has a functional effect on the BPSec draft, which is what this does is it wraps one of the parameters in a byte string, similar to or identical to how another one of the parameters had been wrapped in a byte string. And what this is intended to do is to reduce the burden on the BPSec security block processing. And this is something that is not really specific to this COSE context. It's just something that probably should be a consideration for also future BPSec security context, which is if you have a data structure that's kind of unbounded in size or complexity, it would be a good idea to byte string wrap them so that the abstract security block doesn't inherit that complexity necessarily. So again, not a change in overall behavior, just a change in one form of the encoding to simplify things. Next slide, please. So going back to the original goals is that this is not supposed to be superseding anything that's pre-existing. It's meant to expand the envelope of what can be accommodated in BPSec in standards way. And one thing that this document doesn't touch that is definitely not in scope of the security context is about policies behind any of this stuff. So what this does is it establishes a minimum interoperability set of algorithms, but it doesn't say when it's appropriate to use which algorithm. That is an application need. And it's something that would need to be negotiated either in band or out of band separate from this. So this document has been through a last call, but this last change about the byte string wrapping is a change in the encoded form for one of the parameters. So I don't know if this means that there needs to be another last call, but other than that one change, everything else has been typographical fixes and adding additional constraints. So it's ready for last call if that's needed.
So just to sort of mention to the working group, this document is going to need a document shepherd. So desperately looking for volunteers for anyone who can do the shepherd's write-up. It is not as onerous as you think. It just needs to be done by someone who has actually read and can assert that they have read the document. So a short pause before we actually push it through will give us time to find a document shepherd and act as a second short last call seems to be a reasonable way forwards. I'm looking around the room and everyone's studiously looking at their laptop screens, but we'll put that ask out on the list. It's a great opportunity for people wanting to start to understand the inner workings of the IETF, and I promise you it is not a hard job.
Just from a sense of either in the room or online, does anyone have any issue with a short working group last call due to this one technical change? All right, thank you.
Deafening silence.
And I will mention, since there's a little bit of time left,
Yeah.
the reason for this last change was further implementation experience with this security context. So it has been exercised in more variety of ways, with more of the complexity of COSE being exercised and being explored. So it does have some implementation guiding some of these.
So that's good to know, because
Affirming some of the decisions and guiding this last change.
Because that's one of the questions in the shepherd write-up is, has this actually been implemented anywhere? So that's good to know. Thanks, Brian.
All right. Any other questions for Brian? Well, Brian, presentation one. All right. Our next topic is also going to be from Brian, talking about EID patterns, which I personally am really excited about, because I think it's.
I'm more excited than you.
So yeah, this topic is more speculative, more draft than the earlier one. If we go to the next slide to talk a little bit about what is the point of this thing. Existing bundle protocol agents, existing tools, existing configuration generations and orchestrations for BPAs and BP networks generally already have some kind of a notion of a way to structure an EID set that's more than just listing out an enumeration of individual EIDs. And the point of what's being proposed here is to standardize a way to do this so that the writer of one of these patterns and the reader and user of the pattern have the same interpretation, and you're not expecting a tool to treat things one way and the tool actually treats things a different way. So one way generally to do patterns in text is a glob or a regular expression. The difficulty with especially the IPN scheme of EIDs, which is one that exists right now, is that those mechanisms are just text-based. They don't take into account any intrinsic properties of the EID, and that means that the pattern itself can't take advantage of the structure of a certain EID scheme, and also that the pattern as it's encoded cannot be compressed in ways that currently EIDs have scheme-specific methods for. And one aspect of this kind of pattern matching syntax is that there is an overall network effect related to the more that these mechanisms get used, the more useful they become, because when you are familiar with configuring one policy on one BPA or one security application and others use the same mechanism, well, you don't have to retrain yourself, or you don't have to switch back and forth between sometimes an asterisk means this and sometimes an asterisk means that, and I can't remember which one it uses, so I have to cross-check documentation all the time. So this also has a benefit of reducing the possibility of misconfiguration and security vulnerabilities associated with that. So the tool might very well be doing exactly the right thing that it's supposed to be doing, but the configuration is not what the operator expected it to behave as. And one last thing is that this proposal is compatible with the IPN scheme update, and I'll talk about that shortly. So next slide, please. The specific use cases here are that are spelled out currently, and this is not an exhaustive list, but for security processing, this allows security identities to be encoded in places like PKIC certificates, where a key holder is authorized not just to operate on a single endpoint, but on a variety of endpoints. So all services for a particular node, or even all nodes within a particular authority. And the goal is to have the same kind of behavior as wildcard certificates, in that there are obligations and details that need to be dealt with associated with granting this kind of authority, but the point here is to allow a mechanism to do that granting. The next thing is about routing, forwarding, and authorization. The point of this is to do something similar to how IP sitter, classes sitter domain routing notation works. The point here is not to say that we're using this for routing, but to say that sitter notation now is used widely across many different tools that have nothing to do with IP routing, but have to do with access control configurations or details like that, where I just want to encode a block of IPs without listing out 8,000 different entries. And then configuration of an actual BPA, where we want to talk about, we have allow listing or block listing, or saying things like, in the example here, a certain specific EID is allowed to sign, act as a security source and sign bundles for any source from my organizational authority. So this would be for things like security gateways or for policies related to especially cross-organizational behaviors like that. And the goal here is to avoid syntax that's limited in expressivity. And then lastly, there's the colloquial use, which is somebody who writes an email with the wildcard asterisk or sends a text message to say, you know, I'm looking at traffic and I'm seeing bad behaviors here. This is supposed to be a human-friendly way of encoding this thing that is not going to be difficult to interpret or understand by a person looking at a screen. Next slide, please. So there has been an update, and there still are some open issues related to the pattern. The last update is to address the third point on this slide, which is the any scheme-specific part type of pattern. And this is actually something that's going to be important that hasn't really been discussed elsewhere related to BPAs that act as interior routers within a larger network, that a router can do its job without necessarily understanding all possible schemes that will ever be invented and used. And a router, an interior router especially, that's acting on a trunk, really needs to be able to operate in a way that it's not going to throw traffic away because I don't necessarily understand the exact contents of a report to EID. That field doesn't, it shouldn't affect your ability to route traffic. If your destination and your source are in schemes that you understand, but your report to is not, well, that means you can't send status reports, but you can still route the traffic. And that is a better outcome than if you simply drop the traffic as an interior router, which seems like a bad thing to have happen. So there's the any scheme pattern, which means it's a catch-all, but then there's the any SSP, meaning for a specific scheme. I don't care what's in the scheme specific part. I don't even care that I can decode it or not. But when you see scheme number 2, you treat it a certain way. And treating it a certain way might mean forwarding it. It might mean dropping it. It might mean whatever else the configuration applies to. And then there are 2 scheme specific patterns for IPN and DTN schemes. I'm not going to go through the details right here because there's examples later on, but they are both tailored to the scheme specific parts. So IPN scheme SSP is composed of numbers. So the patterns for IPN schemes are dealing with things at the level of number ranges and number matching. And one important part of one of the open issues currently is that there are some unknowns about the DTN scheme pattern matching, and there's been a suggestion to, and I think it's a good suggestion to defer the DTN scheme patterns out of the main document, because the main document is not more than just saying, here's the IPN scheme and here's the any scheme or any SSP. It also registers entries in IANA registries, and it's important to be able to have those in place even before necessarily all of the possible schemes have been worked out. But the IPN scheme pattern, because it is based on integers and it's well understood semantics, those can be done right now. But just as an eye for the future, there is still one thing that is not stated in this document and should not be stated and maybe needs to be more explicit, which is that any scheme specific pattern should not need to and does not need to have that kind of set logic that you could do with an IPN scheme, but really probably cannot do with a text-based DTN scheme, which is to say pattern A is a strict subset of pattern B, or these 2 patterns have overlap or things like that. There are ways to deal with even a lot of the expected processing of these things that don't require that kind of set logic. It enables you to make certain assertions about things. It enables you to catch problems quicker if you can do them, like in the IPN scheme. But there shouldn't be an assumption by users of this thing that you can do that kind of set logic. So next slide, please. The last change to the document itself was to add a goals section to more clearly lay out what is the point of this thing. It added the any scheme pattern, or it modified the any scheme pattern to be consistent with the others, and added the any SSP pattern to allow this to be general purpose. So even in the absence of a scheme specific, a DTN scheme specific syntax, you can still match the DTN scheme for the any SSP pattern. So you can still handle that in the general case. And then the last thing is this added a registration with the IANA PKIX name constraints extension. And the point of this is to enable some really nice security behavior in a distributed network that's already part of how PKIX operates. We're not inventing any new mechanisms, but we're taking advantage of the way that PKIX is currently designed, which originated in the era of subnetworks that had poor connectivity between them, that had intermittent connectivity, that had network splits and disconnects all the time. And so PKIX and that kind of aspect generally is made to operate and doesn't really need logical modifications to handle distributed DTNs where you have naming authorities and delegations that they can't talk to each other, but they don't need to talk to each other. So next slide. One current open feedback issue is a recommendation to be more narrow in the DTN scheme regular expressions, and there just happens to be a recently published RFC called interoperable regex format, and that is a perfect candidate for this kind of thing because it just narrows down what is going to have the widest support, and if you do it, if you restrict yourself to this, then you're going to operate in a lot more environments than choosing one or the other. There's another recommendation about disallowing empty regular expressions, and that's a reasonable thing. And there's even one thing that I don't think is written up as an explicit issue, and I don't know if it's actually covered by the current text ABNF, is an empty pattern itself should probably be disallowed because it doesn't really make sense to have an empty pattern because there is the catch-all pattern. And then the topic that we were on before about the DTN scheme separating out into a separate draft is probably worthwhile. I think that's the end. If you go to the next slide. I'll skip over the examples for now. We can come back to them, but if you go to the next slide then. It is important to understand that an EID pattern is not an EID. They need to be treated differently. They can't coexist. You can't see a piece of text or a CBOR and know which one you're looking at. This is something that already exists in the land of PKIX, and it's already well understood. These patterns can be complex in practice. So the point of having a common definition is so that a tool that handles them don't need to reinvent the wheel. Next slide, please. Okay, so the goal in the near future is to incorporate some of this feedback, separate the DTN scheme out of this main document, and then just ask for, are there trial or example implementations? And is this something that is small enough that could even potentially be a hackathon topic of saying, I don't care about anything else. I don't care about BPAs or all this other stuff. I just want to create a library in my favorite language to do EID patterns. And I think that's all. All
right. Thank you, Brian. Rick?
Yeah, so chair hat off. Brian, I love this. I've implemented it. It got even better the further I got into implementing it. What Brian didn't point out is that there's the nice textual parsing representation stuff, which is great for all the good reasons about configuration. But there's also a CBOR encoding, which opens the door to routing protocols trying to change or trying to do updates on sets of EIDs. So it gives us a useful building block, although it doesn't step in that direction. And the other aspect I found fantastically useful is you can actually build very dense lookup structures based on the direction your implementation has to go in order to handle this parsing that allows you to start building out very high performance fib style lookups, firewalling style lookups, and so on. This is really good stuff. So I thoroughly support it. One point about pulling out the DTN piece. I agree with you, because you and I had this conversation on the list on it, that going deep into the exact syntax for how to match subsets of bits of DTN EIDs is beyond the scope of this document, because we don't have a very detailed breakdown of DTN EIDs beyond what's in RC 9171. But I think this document should proceed with just enough DTN wildcarding, DTN patterns, to be useful now, so that we don't forget about DTN altogether, because we know it's in use. That would be my point. Thank you.
All right. It's a good suggestion, and maybe just starting with any authority pattern, and you either pick a specific authority or any authority would be a useful starting point.
Yeah, the any authority, the regex works there. It's doable. If we come up with something better or that breaks it into some sort of semantic parts, brilliant. But we don't need that. We can move without having that yet.
Okay.
A few more folks in the queue. Scott Johnson.
Hi, Brian. First, let me say excellent work. This is some really good stuff. My question was, you're saying this is targeted at supporting draft IPN update, which is absolutely fine. Does it support both the 2-element and 3-element encoding methods in draft update, or just the 3-element?
So the way it works right now is the IPN scheme pattern always has 3 elements, but that doesn't mean that it has to. Right now there's no relation between the pattern and the EID in terms of the number of components, in that it uses the logic of the IPN update, but it doesn't care about, did the original EID start out as 2-component or 3-component. There's no restriction there.
Thank you.
Great. Eric.
Good afternoon, Brian. No hats. I think I like I understand the range collapsing stuff. That's appropriate and very useful for correctness and avoiding bugs. I do think when it comes to putting those things into routing tables, we'll have all the same overlap detection problems again.
Yeah.
So because when I did 8805, we had this range of IP addresses thing, and I just ripped it out because it wasn't implementable. So I just replaced it with CIDR only. I understand we don't have CIDR as an option for some of the space. So we'll just have to be cognizant. We'll revisit this overlapping issue if we want to try to use these things again in a routing table context. And then I was going to ask about the string matching or string regex. Given that the definition that we do have for the authority for a DTN is just a string blob, is it inappropriate to just say string regex stuff works in there? Anything that's not a slash?
It's a reasonable starting point to just say either exact match or regular expression. That's what you get. Yeah, that is a doable thing, and it opens the door for that wildcard type things later.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Right. Next is me. So, Brian, 2 things. One comes from the chat. Jorge expressed, had a question as to whether we would separate out DTN at large from this document. I think you addressed that in some of your prior slides. But the thought is to keep the DTN matching in this document as generic as possible, so that a subsequent document may go into a finer grain patterning of the DTN scheme. Is that correct from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that it's workable based on the restrictions that are known about the DTN scheme currently.
In that case, then the suggestion from the chat is just that some language be added that caveats that this matching for the DTN scheme is the most generic possible matching.
Okay.
And that updates may come later. With chair hat on, my question to you is, do you feel that this is a document that you would like to be considered for working group adoption? Do you feel that it is ready to be considered for working group adoption?
Yeah, I think given that there's started to be some trial implementations that it's ready.
And then
I would want to do this last update to address these open issues about the DTN scheme, but I think having the call for adoption can proceed.
we're happy to do that on the mailing list. While we are here, does anyone have a concern about an adoption call for this work? All right.
I'll add one last thing. My implementation is open source. It's on GitHub. I'll put the URL in the chat. So
What language, if you don't mind?
Rust, unfortunately. I'm one of the cool kids.
All right. Any other questions for Brian? All right. Our next speaker is Jenny Cow, who is going to be talking about updates for ADM and ARI. While the slides are loading, I will also note that the DTNMA, which went through last call, has now been picked up by the editors. So we should expect to see that come out in the next few months.
Yes, and we have a little note about that in the presentation.
Oh, that's something.
Yes, I'm Jenny from APL, and I will be presenting on the updates to the DTMA related documents. So as Ed had mentioned, the DTMA draft is in the editor's queue right now, and the AMM, ADM document, as well as the ARI document, they've been adopted by the working group. So the AMM document has been refined down, and so there's only a few TBDs in there, and we have also separated the Yang encoded ADM module, so those are complete separate documents and can be commented on and edited separately. And the ARI document also has some updates, and I'll get into the details of all those updates. The AMP document has also been revived, and it now follows the latest updates to the ARI and BPv7 documents. And this is still a personal draft, so one of the things that we will do is have a working group call to adopt it later. And so this is significantly simpler now with the updates to the AMM document, with the existence of the execution and the reporting set values. Now it's a lot simpler, the messaging protocol. So the existing implementation of earlier drafts are in the NASA AMOS ANMS, so that's the manager, and the APL DTMA tools, and that is the agent. And so those will be updated to reflect the updates to the documents for AMM and ARI. And work has already begun on those.
Sorry, quick clarifying question.
Yes.
Are they publicly accessible, those links?
So there are GitHub repos with the earlier existing implementations. Work is being done right now so that the updates for those implementations will also be made public.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So this is just an overview of the DTMA topic areas. The AMM, ADM documents cover the application management and data models, along with the operational data models and the agent state management. The ARI document covers the data value ARI structure. And the AMP document isn't explicitly listed here, but that is because DTMA doesn't require any specific messaging protocol or any specific transport binding, but we do, of course, have the AMP document as a reference. This is a diagram showing the normative dependencies between the document. Obviously, we want it to only go one way. And so that has been mostly achieved, except there are some back dependencies within the DTMA AMM document. And so there's work currently being done to remove all of that. So it is a nice structure among all these documents. So going into the details of some of the recent changes, starting with AMM ADM documents. So the ADM Yang encoding has become completely separated from the AMM document, so the model is separate from the encoding. And the AMM document, we have done some stuff to clarify the built-in terminology and things to help with implementation, such as the explicit listing of semantic types, and also specifying categories for controls and operators, and adding specific procedures for type matching and converting with built-in and semantic types. We also added a notion of display hint annotations, and these are specifically meant for user interfaces. So, oh, this type is meant to be displayed in decimal or hexamal or binary form, similar to units annotation. For the Yang document, which has been taken out as part of the recent changes, we've raised up section depths. So that is also a benefit of the separation of the Yang separation. And then some other details, but something to point out is we are now using the ARIs as arguments for type naming statements just for consistency of ARI usage, and also more cleanly separated AMM logical definitions from the ADM encoding choices. In the base ADMs that we have examples of, including the agent ADM, we've added the display hint ident hierarchy. So this goes back to the AMM document where we talk about the notion of display hint annotation. This is what we're using in the ADM module itself. And we also added a table filter in the agent ADM to filter and reduce table sizes. In the ARI document, there's been several changes, as you can see. Some notable ones include for just to help with ARI text processing, we are now using the UI authority segment for the namespace, so just following the double slash. So it's really clear what is the namespace and what is not. And then we also added the ability to reference just a namespace. And instead of having implied built-in types, we just have now literals that are untyped, so that is simpler. We also removed the base 32 representation of a byte string, so now it's just base 16 and base 64. And also to prevent unnecessary percent encoding, we have a specific character set of base 64 URL for byte string. And just for implementation guidance, we also have an appendix and added more encoded examples as well. For the AMP document, again, it has been revised. So after a long expiry time, we have actually brought it back. Again, it's been simplified because with the AMM changes, now instead of specifying a lot of things related to the messaging protocol, we just have the exchange of AMM values of execution set and reporting set between the manager and the agent. And we also include the bundle protocol v7 for binding. We go into details for that. But just to point out that even though this is in the AMP document, this is not the only binding that is possible. In fact, we anticipate and encourage there to be future documents. So there is binding to other transports as well. So to go over some open issues, there needs to be some patches for to handle our DTMA stuff with Yang. And so there's been an upstream issue submitted. This is just regarding the inclusion of the ARI part. So we anticipate there to be potentially future issues. So I'm just working with them on that. And then as for the type display hints that was mentioned previously, there are some questions regarding this. Right now it's included in the base ADM for the AMM module. And the question is whether we should put that completely separately in a different ADM or not. Regarding hierarchy and namespaces, right now, it is just a flat namespace. So the question is whether we should make it a 2-level namespace, just like the EID updates. So for example, with the organization, if the module name is IETF DTMA agent, the enumeration would be instead of just being one number, it'd be the organization number and then the ADM number. So IETF would be organization number 1, and then for their first ADM, it could be the DTMA agent, it could be 1.1. This could be very helpful, but then there's a larger question regarding ODM, specifically the operational data models, whether these will also need a 2-level hierarchy, whether we could put it under one parent for all ODMs, like organization 0 or something like that. And this is an interesting question because ADMs can reference ODMs. And so should that be done? And if it can be done, then what will the namespace hierarchy look like with that? For the access control list, so we've had the ACL ADM for a while now, but obviously with the working group adoption, there's been some focus on the larger document as a whole. So just pointing some attention towards the ACL ADM, as we'd like to see some more discussion around that in the mailing list. And finally, for ARI reference resolution, the resolving points are still not completely hammered down. So, are runtime stores allowed to contain ARI references, or should they be resolved before entering runtime? Yeah, and those cover all our overt issues. To speak on implementation experience, which we've done the implementation of the previous versions of the documents, and now we're working on implementing the updates to these documents. So aspects of these new changes have been prototyped with the ANMS ACE, which is a Python library covering specifically ADM and ARI processing, and the DTMA tools, which is a library in C with the DTMA agent. And so these are the basis for encoding, decoding ARIs and ADMs. Prototyping has led to improvements in usability for the ADM syntax and using ARI as a principal form of cross-reference to AMM objects and type names. And the longer term plan is basically that we do these updates under these organizations and then contribute back to these open source projects as external contributions. And so that is the sustainment mechanism for these libraries.
All right, thank you so much. We do have Rick in the queue.
Chair Hatoff, the very quick question concerning the ODMs and the increased depth of hierarchy. If you have a concept of relative ODMs, so let me restart. I think there is some benefit in having a bit more hierarchy in that ODM strand. I think
ODM specifically?
Yeah,
Okay.
I wonder whether the integers are going to get very big very quickly
Mhm.
as people start to produce a lot of models. If you've got relative support, could you do something elegant to say, look, within the scope of this whole block that I'm talking about, the parent is X and everything else is now relative?
Yeah, I think so.
Off the top of my head, sorry.
Well, I also noticed that Brian Sipos joined the queue.
Okay.
So Brian, is that a question or a response to Rick?
More of a general statement about ODMs and just greasing that topic, just to say that if there is only one ODM namespace, then there's the increased possibility for collisions, and so having multiples of them means that things that start out separately and later become overlapping in terms of operations would hopefully avoid collisions easier.
Yeah, that was my thinking as well, Brian. It's just, I think that the world's experience with anything which uses modules is, as soon as you've got modules, you end up with a lot of modules,
Yeah.
and having a mechanism to deconflict and manage them is worth a little bit of effort.
Yeah.
And it also means that in the future, you don't have to worry about, nobody's ever going to touch my ODM because I own it and I can do what I like with it.
Yeah.
I will, with chair hat off, I do know that both online and in the room, we have some folks who maybe have not been following this particular work, but there is a DTNMA document that Jenny referenced on the first slide, which talks about the use of this level of autonomy model and why it's motivating in our community. So I recommend that if this is new work to you, to please go and read that document, DTNMA-14, and then come back with questions.
So chair hat on, I'm going to add an extra point, sort of foreshadowing the discussion at the end of the meeting. So this work here, although has a binding for transport over bundle protocol, is trying to solve a general purpose problem in delay and disruption tolerant networks, or delay and disrupted environments more precisely. How do you manage, monitor and control devices when you can't just walk up to it and press the power button in a post-CrowdStrike style? So this is an example of technology we're working on within this working group that is not bundle protocol specific. So even if you have no interest in bundle protocol, but you are interested in things which are working in this environment, this is still relevant work for you.
And actually, to add more to that with chair hat off, what this has done is take a standard autonomy model that is quite popular in flight software systems for deep space and say this is how fault management and operational autonomy is typically done in flight software. How might that be expressed using network management sensibilities and Yang modules and tooling and so on. And it is the merge of those two things.
Yeah, and going back to the AMP document, the asynchronous messaging protocol, again, even though in the current document we have the bundle binding, we have discussed and really anticipate future documents to come out with other different bindings. So, yeah.
Brilliant.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Carlos Gomez, who's going to be talking about CoAP over bundle protocol. As soon as I get your slides up.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Carlos Gomez. I'm going to present the updated version of the draft entitled Constrained Application Protocol, CoAP over Bundle Protocol. My co-author is Ana Calveras. We are both from UPC. Next, please. So first of all, a reminder on what is CoAP and what is CoAP intended for. So CoAP is an application layer protocol which has been designed for IoT environments. These are characterized by significant resource constraints, such as low energy availability, which often leads to intermittent connectivity because radio interfaces need to be duty cycled. Also high delays, low bandwidth, high error rates, among others. So CoAP is a web protocol. It is based on the REST architecture, REST principles, also used in HTTP. However, CoAP is optimized to provide lightweight operation. For instance, the message header without options has a size of only 4 bytes. And it also includes a little bit of transport layer functionality, especially when running on top of UDP or other unreliable protocols. And nevertheless, it provides also a lot of flexibility and asynchronous message exchanges. Next, please. So the main goal in this draft is specifying how CoAP can be carried over BP. The intended status of the draft is standards track. And today I'm presenting version 01, which aims to address the feedback that was received from both the core working group, which specifies CoAP and its ecosystem, and also the DTN working group. You can see the list of acknowledgements is really long, and we are really thankful for all the good feedback that we have received from everyone. So again, thanks a lot. Next, please. So now let's go through the updates in 01. First of all, we have added a new section entitled Encapsulating Bundle, which describes details about the bundle that encapsulates a CoAP message. The first item here was already in the document, but not in a dedicated section. Anyway, it's about that the CoAP message must be carried as the block type specific data field of the bundle payload block of the encapsulating bundle. Okay, then what's new is the rest. So the lifetime field of the encapsulating bundle must be set to exchange lifetime, that's for CoAP con messages, or non-lifetime, that's for CoAP non-messages. You may recall that con messages are those which require an acknowledgement from the destination endpoint. Non-messages do not elicit acknowledgements. Then a CoAP, well, this was after a comment by Brian, because in the bundle protocol, there is not the notion of requests and responses or responses. So for the bundle that encapsulates the response, a CoAP message response to an incoming CoAP message, we added the simple logic that the destination endpoint ID shall be identical to the source node ID of the bundle encapsulating the received CoAP message and vice versa. And also there was another suggestion in Brisbane that perhaps we might want to aggregate CoAP messages in a single bundle. So that may have some pros and cons, but may be useful in some scenarios. So yeah, we had some discussion and some feedback from the core working group, and it seems like we have a way forward to enable that based on RFC 8323, which specifies how CoAP is carried over reliable transports. So what's relevant there is that there's a message format for CoAP, which includes the length of the message. And then probably in the next update of the draft here, we can specify that we can concatenate several CoAP messages by using that format and include that as the payload of one bundle. Next, please. Then we already had a section on CoAP parameter settings and related times. Here we have added some new content after a comment by Scott Burley in Brisbane as well. We have added that most of the CoAP parameters and related times are relevant for CON messages. However, the protocols below BP may support reliability and congestion control, and in that case, using non-messages might suffice to achieve a reasonable degree of reliability and congestion control, and therefore simplifying the configuration of the protocol. So still, if we use non-messages, there are some congestion control considerations for non-message transmission that still would apply. They are specified in the base COAP specification, which can be summarized as, first of all, nstart, which is the number of outstanding interactions is 1 by default, and it can be changed, but it requires RTT measurements. Another one is that in absence of advanced COAP congestion control, a COAP endpoint that's sending non-messages to some destination which does not provide responses, to be safe, then you should not exceed probing rate, which is 1 byte per second, but that's kind of a safety measure in this extreme case in which you have zero feedback. And on the other hand, a sender may transmit multiple copies of a non-message for a number of reasons. Laurent is in the queue.
Yes, thank you for this presentation. I was wondering if you think about using the non-response option to avoid to get feedback when it's not necessary.
Yeah, that's something that we've already thought about. It's not yet in the draft, but yeah, the no response option would allow, whenever that might seem interesting, for instance, to avoid sending message or reduce message overhead. That's an option that exists in COAP. Also, it may be useful for COAP group communication, which is something we not discuss fully yet here, but it will be in future updates. Thank you. Yeah. Next, please. So we also have a section on observe. Recall that observe is the mechanism by which COAP clients which may be interested in some resource handled by a server, whenever the clients register their interest in that resource, and then whenever there's an update in the state of that resource, the client will just send notifications with a representation of the updated state of the resource. So in some applications, it may be relevant to determine which is the last notification that has been sent. So which notification was the last one sent by the server, or if we received 2 notifications, which one was the last? We state in this draft that when using COAP over BP, it should be decided based on the creation timestamps of the encapsulating bundles. We also explain that, well, if for whatever reason the timestamp information is not available at the application layer, then the time between the reception times of the 2 notifications may be used instead. Here, well, by default, if the difference between 2 notifications is greater than 128 seconds, the last one received is considered to be also the last one sent. That's by default. That's because 128 seconds is greater than the max latency, default max latency in COAP, which is 100 seconds. However, of course, in many of the scenarios where BP may be used, this max latency is not enough. There will be a greater latency, and in that case, we need to use a duration according to the latency of the scenario. In this case, we can refer to Appendix A, which, as you may recall, includes the times to transmit a radio signal between celestial bodies in the solar system. Next, please. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, very quick question. Chair Hattoff. Given you're running over bundle protocol and creation timestamps exist in the encapsulating bundle, do you think you're perhaps trying to optimize for a very rare case here where you're saying, oh, the implementation doesn't propagate that creation, that timestamp up, and so the handling application now has to invent things, but only when would it be easier just to say an implementation must push this timestamp up because it solves this issue? I'd save you 1,000 words.
I agree. Thank you. Next, please. Okay, then you may recall that in the first version of the draft, we attempted to create a new URI scheme, something called COAP plus BP. However, we received feedback that perhaps it would be better to just stick to COAP as the URI scheme. And actually there are some recommendations there in a core working group draft, which is the transport indication document. And on the other hand, the co-op scheme is defined from the base co-op specification. And for the authority component of the URI, we request the creation of 2 new reserved domains in the .arpa namespace. This is actually following the guidance of this transport indication draft. So it would be, the domains would be DTN.arpa for endpoint IDs based on the DTN scheme, or IPN.arpa for those based on the IPN scheme. Next, please.
Where did it go? There we go.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, just a couple of examples of which would be the URI of the discovery resource. That's the well-known /core, which is used in several application layer protocols when using co-op over BP. So if the endpoint ID is of the form DTN://Jupyter sensor, then the resulting URI scheme for that discovery resource when using co-op over BP would be the one that you can see on screen. And for the endpoint ID of an IPN form, say IPN:81.2, you can see that what is the current content in the draft is also the same shown here in the slides, would be that the authority component would be 81.2.ipn.arpa. However, we received some comment that perhaps it would be better to change the order of the service number and the node number. So yeah, we'll apply this change in the next update. So it would be 2.81.ipn.arpa. And we have left to do in the draft to request a well-known service number for co-op, since this is already, well, there will be a registry created after the DTN IPN update draft for the IPN URI scheme, the registry for the well-known service numbers for BP7. Next, please. Also, we have added a section on securing co-op over BP. We explain that the co-op-based specification defines a binding to DTLS. There are several DTLS security modes. 2 of them are mandatory to implement with co-op. There's also, however, RFC 8613, that's object security. It's called OSCORE. And optionally, it provides end-to-end application layer payload protection. And it has some interesting properties, such as it is based on shared security context, which may be based on pre-shared materials. So it would avoid the initial handshake and related performance penalty that may happen with DTLS, for instance, and which would be critical in many of the BP environments. So that's why in the draft, we state that the use of DTLS for co-op over BP is not recommended. And also we've added a minor detail that group OSCORE protocol is used to secure co-op group communication. Next, please.
Just one question on the security. Earlier, we saw Brian Sipos propose COSI context for BPSec. Do you also see a COSI context for BPSec useful here, or would that be separate?
I understand that OSCORE is also using COSI, so we need to see whether it's already covered or something else is needed.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. So yeah. So we also explained that, as the working group knows very well, there's BPSec, which provides security services for BP. It provides integrity and or confidentiality for 1 or more blocks of a bundle. However, OSCORE also can protect with confidentiality and integrity a co-op message payload, 1 co-op message header field, and also some co-op options. So we need to elaborate further this because, yeah, we can have security at 2 layers. So is it like, do we need to just use one of the 2 layers? Do we need to use both? Or in which case we need to do what? So we need to develop this further, and any input that you may have is very much welcome. And also about OSCORE in particular, we have also explained that OSCORE provides protection against replay attacks. That's by means of an anti-replay sliding window with a window size of 32. And if, however, a greater window size is needed, for instance, because we are dealing with a scenario with much higher latency, the different window size needs to be known by both the sender and receiver at the moment of security context establishment. Next, please. Finally, we have the IANA consideration section where we provide, well, we request actually the creation of 2 new reserved domains in the .arpa namespace. We follow the guidance of RFC 6761 for that. The domains, again, would be DTN.arpa, IPN.arpa. And, well, we also provide the full template of domain name reservation considerations that's required in RFC 6761. It is here and also in the next slide, but the main summary is that the point in the middle, which is the expectation for application software, is that no DNS resolution is attempted. Instead, the prefix is processed into an endpoint ID. And the next slide just copies basically the rest of the IANA considerations, and that's my last slide.
Rick?
Oh, you've reordered. Okay. So very quickly about the ARPA registration. Very interesting and actually parallel to several other conversations that have been happening simultaneously. And I'm looking at Eric Klein at this moment as well. One of the discussion that's been happening is actually putting everything under bp.arpa because Bundle Protocol has multiple URI schemes, and to stop a flood of registration straight onto the root of ARPA is perhaps putting 3 more characters in. It's not open discussion. Eric, if you've got a comment.
Yeah, thank you. That's, I guess, I don't know, hats kind of half on, half off. I don't know. Yeah, we've been talking to people this week about bp.arpa and an IPN.bp.arpa so that we could transform an allocator and a node number into a node.allocator.ipn.bp.arpa name. Look that up and find CLA, control plane information for delivery. This is a slightly different case though, because you're not doing DNS at all here. You just need a thing that fits a format for the COAP URI scheme. Is that correct? Can you go back to slide 7?
I assume there's some resolution that has to happen somewhere in the stack. But
Oh, see, maybe it's 8. Maybe it's slide 8.
next one.
The next one.
Slide 8.
That one.
Right. So, first question. Yeah, is 81.2, is that an allocator and a node, or is that a node and a service?
I can answer from the IPN draft perspective. That's a node and a service,
right?
Because if it otherwise the service must be there.
So then I think one of the things that's revealing about this example is that, first of all, I think the service name, like, it kind of doesn't belong in a DNS like lookalike kind of name, right? So that could just be 81.ipn.arpa, and the 2 part should be part of some other URL piece later on. In other words, the service name is not part of a, yeah, so this doesn't feel like it belongs as part of Bundle Protocol. It feels like it's a COAP specific thing. And so if you wanted to have a COAP.arpa where you put a bunch of other transformational things underneath there, it feels like there's some kind of impedance mismatch here that I don't quite understand yet. I haven't thought about it completely, but some things don't seem like they would really belong intuitively in a DNS style name, and but I don't know what the strict requirements are for a co-op URI. So my other thing in the oh, do you want to respond? I'm sorry.
Okay, so yeah, basically we'll need to double check, like think again about all of this. Because so far I thought that other than the order, like changing the order of 81 and 2, I was not aware of other issues, but yeah, I have to give some other thought here.
I mean, there's nothing that says you couldn't put the service in the name, I guess. That could be, I suppose that could be interesting, yeah. But definitely reversed. But there does seem to be something about, like, this is, if it's not going to be used, if it can't be used for DNS, then maybe it should be something else. But can you also jump to slide 4? I think slide 4, 7, 8. Oh yeah, for aggregated co-op messages in a single bundle. what are the requirements for making sure that they all those messages belong or can be properly routed by the same destination EID? Like you're going to pack a bunch of co-op messages into the same bundle. That bundle has a single EID. So the requirement then, I assume, is documented that all those co-op messages can be processed by that EID. Like they're all supposed to be sent. They all go together.
You mean if there's a requirement on the routing? No.
No, you have a bunch of co-op messages.
Yeah.
Right. And so I presume there's some additional requirement that if you're going to stick them in the same bundle, going to the same destination EID, that like there's something that ties them all together to be routed to that same destination EID for a reason.
Yeah, so I guess it depends on the application a little bit. I see that some applications might benefit from sort of doing this aggregation and sending, yeah, the messages have to be, well, maybe that's not like explicit, but yeah, understand that this is for communication between the same endpoints, same two endpoints.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps that's missing. So yeah.
Or is there an expectation that the co-op service at that destination EID unpacks all of the messages and then does some additional possible routing of the co-op messages?
Yeah, I think that could also happen if
As a
you have
proxy.
some more elaborate architecture with maybe proxies in the middle, which
Yeah.
may be doing something like what you suggest.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
we
yeah,
need to-
I don't know that there's a requirement here, just like consideration for like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll think about it. Thank you.
For when you pack them. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. We do have a few more folks in the queue. Scott Burley.
Hi, just not a question, just an observation. There's a company in Northern California called Untitled Chapter that at one point had developed an implementation of co-op over bundle protocol that was going to be a commercial product. I don't see that product listed on their website anymore, so that may have been abandoned. But I thought you might be interested in contacting them to see what kinds of technical issues they encountered and how they overcame. If you are interested, let me know and I'll send you contact information for them.
So actually, we did try to contact them. Perhaps, I'm not sure if we used the right means for that because we saw a published paper. We used the email addresses of the authors of that paper. I think there were 4 authors from that company. But yeah, we send them a message explaining that we are starting this internet draft and whether there would be any feedback from the implementation perspective. But yeah, we didn't get any response so far. So I don't know if perhaps there may be other ways, other channels, or someone else to contact.
I will see if I can find a way. But I'm glad to know that you were aware of it anyway. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Adam?
Adam Whitaker. So on the ARPA thing, I think I'm in agreement with Eric here. Because if you're not going to do anything but DNS and do a lookup, why are you putting it there, right? I understand what you're trying to do, but I think we have to have a conversation on that. And I'm mostly interested because I have been dealing with ARPA for the past couple of years on some other work. So I have a couple bits of insight that we can share. So that's my observation on that.
Thank you.
And Scott. Scott Johnson.
Hi. Just in related to the .ARPA discussion, there will be the possibility for a forward lookup now as the CLA and IPN RR types have been approved. So those will be going into the registry soon. On tangent to that, if the working group wishes to take up that document now, I have no problem with that. I just wanted to get it over the finish line so that the entries were registered, and now we have that capability if we want to do forward lookups in that fashion.
All right. Thank you.
Good to know, Scott. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great presentation.
Oh, and I'll add just an extra bit, which is it's great to see people starting to get application protocols running over BP. So very welcome work. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Scott Burley, who's going to be talking to us about bundle-in-bundle encapsulation updates. And
Great, thanks. This is like a little over 20 slides. I'll try to go quickly. We've talked about bundle-in-bundle encapsulation before. This is a very more of a reminder than anything else. And it's been discussed and is currently in discussion among the 4 of us listed on this title page here. Next slide. Oh, and it's chopped off at the bottom.
Yes, sorry, Scott. The IETF tooling seems to be throwing fonts away everywhere. So if those want the original slides, they have been updated to uploaded to the meetings material. Sorry, Scott. Can you struggle on through with what you've got, or perhaps flip to your own copy?
Let me try sharing my own then.
Yeah, go ahead.
It may be more satisfactory for everybody.
approved. All right, you are approved.
Oh, wait a second. Do I have to share the entire screen, or is there an option to share just one window?
There's an option for the whole screen. Ed and I are clicking simultaneously, which isn't helping. You click, not me. Oh no, you have permissions to share.
Yeah, I have permission to share, but it's for the entire screen, which is okay. But it'd be cleaner if it were just a single. But that's fine. Let me do this. Can anyone see this?
Not yet.
We've got a starting message, so hopefully it's happening.
It might have timed out. Maybe we reject and start over.
Yeah, okay. I click revoke.
Right, let's try that one more time.
Okay.
This is the problem with round trip exchanges.
Fortunately, we're very close. We're very close. Very little delay. Okay.
So if you request again, Scott.
Okay. Let me. Okay. All right. So I will cancel. It has now asked me what I want to share. I will cancel that. I've got permission denied showing. If you invite me again, I'll try again.
Let's see. How's that?
Okay.
It's promising.
And this is showing select your slide, which I think is talking to you.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's not it. Request a screen share again, or maybe we can get Rick to.
All right. Good. Let me ask to share screen.
Oh,
So
wait. All right, you have been approved.
Okay. Okay. So I accept, and now I can pick a window, and
Yay.
you see that? All right, technology once again. Okay, so the current status of bundle encapsulation. There was a very recently lightly revised draft posted a couple of days ago, just so we have something to talk about at this meeting. Prior to that, the most recent specification was this BIBE CT-03. The current EP v7 implementations discussed in that draft conform to that draft are including the ION implementation, DTN-ME, and micro DTN, and the Spotting Corporation plans a demonstration of a BIBE-based service provider configuration on the International Space Station later on this year. The motivation for bundle encapsulation goes way back. in the original draft in 2009, the idea was to provide support for content-centric networking or information-centric networking, to enable efficient custodial retransmission of multicast bundles, and to do security tunneling, in particular defense against traffic analysis. And that's kind of a recurrent theme in bundle encapsulation thinking, is that it's maybe the most important use of it is in security in various ways. The draft was sort of resurrected in 2013. At the time, we were looking at BPSec, and was put together as a way of disentangling routing from security. So we had the notions of a security source and a security destination that seemed to impose constraints on routing that were not likely to be successful. So the idea was, oh, great, when you want a security destination other than the bundle destination, you encapsulate it in a bundle.
Sorry to interrupt. We're only seeing your first slide. So if you full screened, that's on a
I
different
did.
screen.
Huh. Oh. Well, okay.
So carry on at slide.
Do you see what you right now you're seeing?
We're seeing PowerPoint. We're seeing PowerPoint and the opportunity to edit your title slide.
Oh, okay, cool.
Which is fine, and if you just flick through in that mode, then
you'll see everything, right? It's just that it won't be on full screen. All right,
definitely
fine.
large enough.
Let's try that. So can you see motivation 1 of 2?
No. We can see revisiting bundle and bundle encapsulation.
All right, let me do this.
That's it.
There we go.
Yep. If you do.
Okay, there we go. All right, that's fine. All right, so resurrected bundle encapsulation draft in 2013, disentangling routing from security. Enough of that. More recent BIBE drafts started looking at a way to use BPv7 as a reliable convergence layer protocol under BPv7, and there are arguments for that I will present in a little bit. A second page of motivation is more recent ideas being, it can serve as a mechanism for building service provider data DTN networks, that is, customer bundles entering a portion of the overall network that is operated by a certain service provider. Those bundles might be encapsulated in bundles that satisfy transmission constraints of the service provider itself, and that could be things like security, quality of service, time to live, and routing. So when the bundle exits from that service provider portion of the network, it can resume its original life. Also, and this has been developed by folks at the Marshall Space Flight Center, it's a mechanism that can be used for backward compatibility with BPv6 because there's an installed base of BPv6. The serialized BPv6 bundles can be acquired from network, and then they can be encapsulated in BPv7 bundles and go through a BPv7 based network to some other island of BPv6 functionality extracted and forwarded within that island. There are a couple of open design questions that we won't talk about in this meeting, but we can talk about on the mailing list. One is, does the idea of using BPv7 as a reliable convergence layer protocol, basically what used to be called custody transfer under BPv7, does that really make sense? And there is some motivation for this because in some cases you've got no other reliable convergence layer protocol. The acknowledgement of a bundle may take entirely different paths from the path taken by the original bundle, may happen at a later time, arrive by a different medium, and BPv7 is a way of enabling those acknowledgements to get back to where they belong in a standardized way. As an alternative, maybe we want to look at a different disruption-tolerant convergence layer protocol. There is work along this line being contemplated within the Consultative Committee for Space Data Systems. And that's something that we can certainly discuss, and that would entail removing custody transfer from bundle encapsulation. If it were going to stay, is that the right name for it? The motivation for retaining that name is that it's very similar in functionality to what was in BPv6, and people are familiar with that name, but we could certainly pick another name for it if we decided to keep it in bundle encapsulation, call it BIBE retransmission protocol or something else. A quick review of how bundle encapsulation works, just for those who haven't spent a lot of time studying it. BIBE is sort of a Janus sort of device. It faces in two directions. It's a convergence layer protocol, and a protocol for which the convergence layer adapter is the administrative element of an application agent. So all of the protocol data units of that protocol take the form of BPv7 administrative records, and get wrapped in bundles, as administrative records do, in the same sort of way that we wrap bundle status reports, which are likewise administrative records. We wrap those in bundles. The protocol data units themselves look a little bit like this. There are two types of PDU. There are the BIBE PDUs, BPDUs, and the record content of a BIBE PDU, which is itself an application data unit, is a BPDU message that consists of a transmission ID, basically a number that you use to track and report on the reception of that bundle. Retransmission time, which is used to inform the receiving node that if it's going to acknowledge this bundle in a custodial way, it has to do it in such a way that it gets back to the sender by this moment. And then the serialized bundle itself, which is the encapsulated bundle. The other PDU in the protocol as written up is a custody signal based on aggregate custody signaling from BPv6 as deployed on the space station. The record content of a custody signal is a custody message that has got a disposition code, basically I got it or I refuse it for some reason, and then an array of disposition scope sequences, each of which is here's a transmission ID that this disposition applies to, and here's how many more consecutively in that sequence it also applies to. The source node's bundle protocol agent invokes the services of a BIBE CLA to forward a bundle. The BIBE CLA, which is built into the BPA itself, acting as a BPv7 application, presents that serialized bundle to the source BPA, so it comes in like a second time as an application data unit. The values of the parameters by which that bundle, the encapsulating bundle, will be forwarded are an implementation matter. They can be based on the metadata applying to the source bundle or something entirely different. The source BPA issues a new encapsulating bundle, and the payload of that bundle is the serialized bundle, and actually it's the payload is actually the BPDU message. It computes a route for the encapsulating bundle, forwards the bundle over a normal standard convergence layer adapter like LTP, TCP, UDP, whatever. On reception, the encapsulating bundle is received by the destination by means of the CLA that actually physically transmitted the thing, whether that's LTP, TCP, UDP, whatever. The destination BPA, having received that encapsulating bundle extracts its payload, which contains the encapsulated serialized bundle, and delivers that payload to the destination application, which is the administrative element destination node's application agent. That's a BIDE CLA. The BIDE CLA delivers that the encapsulated bundle to the destination BPA as if it had been received directly by UDP or whatever. Here it's acting as a CLA rather than as an application. And the destination bundle protocol agent dispatches that encapsulated bundle, either forwarding it or delivering it or both if it's a multi-point, in the usual way. Custody transfer, just briefly summarizing here, the content of that administrative record has this transmission ID, which is 0 if you don't want custody transfer. The expected time of acknowledgement, again, 0 if you're not doing custody transfer. The encapsulated bundle. The acknowledgement of the encapsulating bundle is not sent individually one for one. Instead, you aggregate all those acknowledgements into a new administrative record that goes in a responding bundle. The disposition code, whether it's custody accepted or not, and the sequences of transmission IDs pertaining to that disposition code are the rest of that administrative record. If the acknowledgement is not received by the expected time, that's retained at the sender for each of the bundles that went out as payloads of encapsulating bundles. Then transmission of the encapsulating bundle is assumed to have failed, and the encapsulating bundle itself is re-forwarded by the source BPA. This, of course, adds some overhead because you've got a bundle encapsulation, which means you've got an extra bundle header. So the cost of doing this, you're buying an additional primary block. No way to get around that. You might have a quality of service extension block that pertains to the encapsulating bundle. You almost certainly want a block integrity block targeting the primary and QoS blocks. You might want a block confidentiality block targeting the payload block so that you can protect the payload, the encapsulated bundle by encryption. And then you've got the payload block itself. It has a payload block header like any payload block. It's block type specific data because it's an administrative record. It's got a very small administrative record header. And then the administrative record content is the BPDU message, which has a transmission ID that might be 0, has a new transmission time that might also be 0, and then the original serialized bundle. So there is some bandwidth consumption involved in using bundle encapsulation. And depending on the sizes of elements in the primary block, it could be significant. The benefit that you get from...
Sorry, can I just ask a quick question at that point?
Sure.
Because I seem to be a natural pause. Can you go back one slide?
Yeah.
So I've got 3 quick questions, and I'm perfectly happy to take the conversation much further to a longer conversation to the list. So I don't quite understand why you include the retransmission time, because as a receiver, I don't care. I just see retransmissions or I receive duplicates. I don't know why. I can understand it's important for the sender to have some kind of retransmission, but I don't understand why the receiver needs to know, or I might be missing something there.
The receiver is aggregating the acknowledgements, and so it needs some sort of guidance on when do I send my aggregation of acknowledgements.
Yes, but
right. So I'm still speaking, and knowing what time the sender of the earliest deadline encapsulating bundle needs the answer by is a good cue for selecting a time at which you cut off aggregation and send it. So please go ahead.
Okay, so yes, I understand that. I just wonder whether locking the retransmission time to the acknowledgement aggregation sending I can see, I think they are two different timers. I can see that you might default them to the same value. I wonder about that. My other question was, can I have multiple bundles in flight while waiting for while waiting for the acknowledgements?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
And if that's the case, what happens if I lose an acknowledgement for one of, let's say, two bundles in flight, but I only get an acknowledgement for one?
Well, it's aggregated acknowledgements. So if you lose an acknowledgement, a custody signal, essentially, you're gonna fail on getting acknowledgements from multiple bundles. All of those bundles, retransmission thresholds, timeouts will expire, and those individual bundles will all get retransmitted.
Okay, thank you. Yep, brilliant.
Let me jump in as well. We are at time. Scott, if we were to take just another minute for any wrap up or final comments, I do want to make sure that we have enough time, good enough time for the recharter conversation, which is sort of our last agenda item. So
sure, I will run through the next slides in 15 seconds and we can move on. And that's just to say the benefit that you get from this is a number of potential applications that we've discussed at one time or another before: cross-domain security, defense against traffic analysis, custodial reliability, that's the thing we've been talking about, transient quality of service, bundle and bundle in service provider networks, which I mentioned a little bit earlier on about service provider imposing its own policies on security and so forth. IPv6 compatibility that I mentioned earlier, transient critical forwarding, transient multicast, source path routing, some combinations that we haven't even thought about yet, certified multicast. That's all.
Yes.
It's tunneling. You can do a lot with it. Is the executive summary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Scott, just chair hat on. I think this is really important work. We know the community's been desperate for it, and it's really welcome. So thank you guys for working on this.
All right, and now finally, I'd like to turn the mic over to Rick to kick off a rechartering discussion.
Okay, so next slide, please. First off, welcome to the internet area. For those of you who are unaware, we have been shuffled out of the transport area and we're now part of the internet area. This is mostly because the IESG decided to shuffle around various groups within various areas, and transport area has now very much become part of the web and transport area, and that really made no sense for DTN as a whole. So we're now part of the internet area, and that allows us to think of DTN as part of that wider making internetworking work holistically rather than being a replacement for TCP. Next slide, please. So this is now the perfect time to recharter. So our previous charter is now 3.5 years old. We have achieved some things. If you look at the milestones on the data tracker, you'll see that we've made good progress on some things. We obviously, as all working groups, have failed to make progress on others. That is really down to bandwidth and people's cycles and changing in times as well. But you'll notice that our current charter, and if you go back to our original charter, was 100% focused on bundle protocol. And that is because the output of the DTN research group was the DTN architecture document, which said there is this thing called bundle protocol, which solves a lot of the problems in the use cases we have identified, and we consider this to be good work for the IETF. And so the DTN working group was originally chartered and rechartered again to focus on bundle protocol, addressing what's out there, addressing the use cases with bundle protocol, and fleshing out the full stack from top to bottom. And included as part of that was, of course, the management piece. Now, as work on the management architecture proceeded, we received interest and feedback from the wider IETF community saying, firstly, we don't quite understand your use cases, but luckily we had documents which back that up, which is great. And secondly, saying, well, I like what you're trying to do here, but I don't want to use bundle because I'm not talking about space, I'm talking about other environments. And that was the first hint we started to have that delay and disruption tolerance, although bundle protocol is a solution, may be part of a larger problem space that people are looking at. So next slide, please. I've got ahead of myself on the slides because this is what I'm trying to summarize. So there is increased interest in people saying, I have a delay and disruption tolerant use case. I understand how bundle protocol can help me. And I understand that bundle protocol is in operation, is an increasingly mature deployed technology and is seeing ongoing increase in usage. But I wish to integrate a bundle protocol based backbone with IP systems, or I wish to push bundle protocol over IP, or actually I just want to understand the use cases that were defined as part of bundle protocol and look at how perhaps I can stretch my existing IP technology in a pure IP solution for reasons of I have existing IP infrastructure. Bundle protocol is not an option to me for reasons beyond the technological decision. And therefore, there is relevance in expanding the scope of the DTN working group to say delay and disruption tolerant networking does not just mean BP. There are use cases and environments outside of it, but that's a greater than, not equals. So next slide, please. So the feeling from the chairs and discussion with the AD and various interested parties is that we should broaden the scope of the charter. So we maintain our focus on bundle protocol. This is the home of bundle protocol. That's where we started from, and that's where we will continue to put the effort in. And we will, of course, include the DTN management piece because that's work in progress. It's vital for people using bundle protocol as well as direct applicability to people in the DTN space. But there is increasing interest for how do we make quick work over long latencies and long round trip times and with potential disruption? How far can you stretch a single quick session? That's a really interesting problem because A, it's applicable to bundle protocol, and I did a presentation on this about a year ago now. You can use quick as a CLA, that's great. But equally, if you've got quick connections over long links, you may say, just for that hop, IP is fine. I don't need to bring a whole bundle stack for my use case. So that's an example of new IP-based technology that has emerged since this working group was formed and since the IRTF did all its great work, which is relevant, and we have subject matter experts who attend this group and subject matter experts within the IETF who ought to be having the same conversations in the same room. So it seems relevant to me personally to put that within the charter. And as we've seen today, DNS is now a hot topic. We've reached a maturity and we are thinking of bundle protocol where we're asking questions of how do we make it fit with everything else? And DNS comes up again and again and again and again. And my God, we've got to have the right answer for this. And that relies on expertise across the IETF as a whole, the DNS ops teams, the people who built this for the internet, and to say, help us get this right. And we have the expertise from the space use cases, blah, blah, blah. So that again is part of that broadening. And the final bullet is and the next slide, please. The working group gets to decide. So this is for us all to discuss. And the final decision is, because this is the IETF done on the mailing list. And of course, there is actually a slightly further review process through the ISG, blah, 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 blah. But that is guided by the willingness of the working group to work on subjects and not just say, this is a great idea, somebody should work on that. Where milestones always come unstuck is when someone says this is important for the group, but nobody is actually able to provide the cycles to do the work. So keep that in the back of your mind, but really, open mic, what should we do next? What are the key things people think are important? to include in an updated charter? Broad, hand-wavy topics are fine. Ed, any comments? This kind of chair's pitch.
Yeah. No, what I would say to that is a great set of slides. And and no, this is, I think, exactly right. What I would add is even in bundle networks, we understand that not every hop is a bundle hop, and that there are hops in between. And this is a good chance to address some of that. And I start seeing the queue filling up. So let us begin. Dan.
Hi, Dan Bogdanovic. From my work, I'm getting involved in some constellation networks, and there are multiple architectural questions how to create routing architectures that will be most efficient if you create a constellation that has that is trying to cover the whole world, that you have a northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, and what is the best way to connect and communicate across such constellations. So expanding the work to other IETF technologies is something that we should consider, because there is a demand by the industry to provide such solutions, because they are saying we want to have a IP reachable UE wherever that UE is. Now, the actual real life examples are all about reaching UEs on the Earth's surface, but I wouldn't be surprised if that would be also used for flying devices within the Earth gravitational field. And at the end, I wouldn't be even surprised that it would be used for intra-constellation communication for management and autonomic purposes. So these are the requirements that I've seen from the field, and I think those are the areas that we would be able to address within this working group.
Now, Toutain, so another point that raised this week, it's about constraint networks. So I come from the LP1 communities, and maybe we are trying to reinvent the wheel. So Carles talk about co-op, and it's things where we have sometimes very long delay. It's the same case. For example, we are working on underwater communication, where we have very, very few bandwidth, but we don't have also a permanent communication. So I think one interest would be to see how to apply this protocol where you have very, very few bandwidth.
And just a comment to that, some of the early bundle work and development was coming from underwater acoustic networks and the applicability therein. Kevin Fall in particular, who was one of the authors there.
Okay, good.
Alberto.
Thanks, folks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So just a slightly different perspective from the previous comments. For those who have been working on the bundle protocol and the DTN architecture around the bundle protocol, especially for space, I think we already know, and this was part of the last charter discussion, I think, we already know that there are still some items pending to complete the operationalization of the networks, especially when we think about the lunar surface, things like node discovery, routing, more security. So I think that in practical terms, that should continue being a priority. In addition to that, fully supportive of looking at things like quick and how how IP lives with together with the bundle protocol or on its own for the same spaces scenarios. The only challenge is bandwidth, is trying to see how we prioritize so that in the time allocated we can make progress.
Alberto, I 100% agree, and I want to make this clear. We are doing great work on bundle protocol. This is the home of bundle protocol, and we are not discarding bundle protocol and doing something else cool instead. So yeah, I think those of us who've been involved in this working group for a long time know how much we've done and how much is still to be done. So, and I know there's willingness to get that work done. So.
And also to add to that, one of the parts to this is, the IETF is a volunteer organization, and the people that want to make sure and focus that bundle protocol related things continue will be still devoting their efforts to bundle protocol related things. But if we're able to bring some of the energy for some of the quick work and DNS work in as well, it provides a single good place to have conversation and discussion about what those problems are. And I think all of us would learn from those kinds of conversations.
Oh, thank you. And just it's and this may be the elephant in the room, but it's how we deal with evolutionary versus disruptive organizationally.
Absolutely. And just one moment for Eric to jump queue to respond.
Yeah, sorry. AD hat on. I don't know if this would address your concerns per se, Alberto, but one way to tackle that is to make sure that we have applicability statements or scope statements or things that say, we estimate that this is appropriate for these use cases or these constraints, or that these are the considerations if you're going to do X, Y, or Z. So some considerations documents, that kind of thing. So it'd be possible to recommend, and recommendations can overlap. They don't have to be disjoint. But that might be one way to help keep things organized.
Awesome, thank you.
Mark, you're next in the queue.
Ed, Rick, the Empire, the Sith, the Resistance, the Jedi, bundle protocol. Let them die. Kill them if you need to. Join me.
Mark, fantastic. We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
We can't hear you, and also we would like to have the discussion in the time, and let's not say things like "let it die." It's not quite the unity message. Yes.
Anyway,
yes.
Marc Blanchet. I think there's a misunderstanding here, is because what we've been doing is looking at the whole IP stack. So Quick is just a piece of it. Yeah. So when I see this, this is not about Quick actually. It's about the whole IP stack. And if you refer to what we've been, for example, yesterday side meeting, there was 80% of the time spent on something not related to Quick. So first consideration. A few other considerations is exactly related to what Alberto said before, which is I see quite dangerous, difficulties in having to prioritize work for both stacks. And given what we've seen since a year in the various mailing lists, there are strong opponents of the IP approach, and I'm concerned about how consensus will be read by the leadership based on what we've seen before. So, how the documents that are related to IP will be progressing given the strong positions that we've seen since so far. Thank you.
So I'm going to respond to that. I think, Eric, made a very valid point, which is the best way to judge and achieve consensus is on technical merit. And in order to judge something technically, we need to have an understanding of the applicability and the use cases for which something addresses it. And then no matter whether you like cheese or not, and I'm going to use cheese as an example here, if you understand the purpose and pleasure of cheese, you can then make a objective judgment over whether this, and my analogy is breaking now, but so that you can have a as long as we can put an objective framework against which we can judge things technically, and that requires work from everyone who is putting work in. So I agree, we're raising the bar slightly for that. Then we can have a grown-up, sensible, technical, objective discussion about things. If I'm frank, angry exchanges on the mailing list is no good for anyone. It's divisive, it's destructive, and there is a lot of commercial and government interest in this work, and it is only increasing. And if the IETF fails to do relevant and correct things, then that interest will move to alternative SDOs. And I personally believe the IETF is probably the best SDO for these kind of wide-ranging, well-thought-out technical standards. So,
so agree with what Rick said. But additionally, CCSDS as an SDO is
yeah,
something
I
that
understand.
space agencies do pay a lot of attention to. But we have about 9 minutes left, and I do see a couple other folks in the queue. Sally.
All right, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Sauli Kiviranta, Delta Signi Labs. I just want to echo and fully support what Mark just said about this, that IP is not quick, and it might be a little bit premature for the deep space work and IP there, and especially what was mentioned about the opposing opinions about this. So I would like to a little bit suggest also widening the scope of this IP over deep space and not just box it into the quick. And I also fully support the second motion about this merit and objective assessment of different alternatives, that subjective opinions should not have any room in our work for the space. The risks are just too large there, so I fully support this, that whenever there are suggestions that might be a little bit controversially perceived, that as soon as we see the running code, but also objective assessment and we make decisions on base of merit. So just those 2 points I fully support. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Bullet 4, IP. Yeah, just this is what I typed on my laptop yesterday. This is.
Yeah.
Can you set this? Like, yeah. Sorry, Scott, small interrupt.
Yeah, Eric Klein, 80 head on. I just wanted to say, if you're, as you're making your comments or as you're providing your thoughts and feedback, if sometimes it's hard to tell whether the conclusion is that you support a recharter or not. I get that it's feedback into the process, but I don't know how you chairs feel.
As a chair, I think we should recharter.
Well, but I think we take it to the mailing list, and the mailing list discussion will come to that.
Right, but I'm curious if people could also add, if they have the at the end of their perspective on certain specific aspects, whether or not that means they don't support a rechartering, or they would tentatively support it if it had these alterations. Yeah.
And we could also, in addition to that, we could at the end do a show of hands.
Yeah, and of course, as you said, we'll do it on the mailing list as well. Yeah. So.
All right, Scott.
Hi. Two things, I suppose. One, just to once again support what Rick was saying. I think that as long as what we're discussing here is on a technology-based and objective basis, then I think the results are going to be productive and everyone is going to benefit. I guess I would assert that strong opposition to express ideas is like, actually, if the opposition is objective and based on technical concerns, I don't see that as a problem. People are expected to have different opinions and to express them, with a justification that supports those ideas. I think that's healthy, and I don't think it's anything that anyone should be walking away from. To Eric's point, specifically on rechartering, I would be for rechartering. I think the details are going to, exactly how we recharter is going to make a lot of difference. In particular, I would like to see some of the things that were in the original charter advanced in priority, because I think for some of those things, it's time we make more progress on. I'm thinking of multicast, for example. That's all I've got for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. If you want to talk for a moment, I'll do a quick show of hands.
Okay, so just off the top of my head here, talking about further evolution of bundle protocol, I'm glad to see Fred Templin sat there, because I know you're doing a lot of personal draft stuff on LTP. LTP has been lingering for a bit. If you go back and read the LTP spec, of course, it only talks about bundle protocol version 6. That seems an obvious little line item to put into the new charter for the chair hat off, and some sort of rev to the existing LTP spec, because I know other people are looking at more advanced changes, simply to make bundle protocol version 7 mentioned alongside LTP in a document somewhere would just be a sort of housekeeping exercise. So I can see, as well as big flagship items in a recharter, having some housekeeping things which we can just get cleared off and tidied up and get our house in order. Right, I'll shut up. I'm just filling time.
No, absolutely. And we do have, well, I'll leave this open for just a few more moments. To echo Scott's point, I do think that as we focus on what are the technical solutions to the defined problems, and to Eric's point, making sure that we have definitions of the problems that must be solved, those are things that can be updated because everyone has problem statements and everyone has solutions against problems in their domain. But getting those problems written down in a common place with a unified audience, I think would be a tremendously useful thing to do. Mark.
You want the music and the mask again, or?
It's yeah.
No. I haven't responded to the question, and I will not. The reason is, to me, it's like too vague in terms of, what it is, right? So the only thing that seems related to our work is the third bullet, and I already said that, this is not quick, this is the whole thing. Therefore, I would, delay my answer based on, more details about, what it is and what, and the few considerations I've said.
So can I respond to that? Because this is my slide deck. I literally just wanted to give some very broad examples. I regret, quick should say IP. That is perfectly valid. None of that is binding. None of that is a proposal. I will probably make some formal chair hat off proposals onto the list. So we'll get that discussion happening. This was simply as an example of bundle protocol, non-bundle protocol, any other. So please don't read too deep into this. For the same can be said, this show of hands is to get the sense of the room. This is not a commitment for anything in particular. So there we go.
Hi, Scott Johnson.
Hi, Scott Johnson, Spacely Packets. Concerning the role of DNS and DTN, I would certainly welcome the expansion of scope of the working group to include this. As you may know, I have a couple of drafts recently related to this topic, and we're starting to get some good feedback from the larger IP and SIG community, as well as an interest from the DNS community to understand the limitations of space communications and the possibilities of extending the scope of these networks to include that. So I would be in favor of that being added to the workgroup charter if recharter does occur.
All right, thank you so much. I will, in the minute that we have remaining, just echo some comments that we saw in the chat, which is from both Jorge and Simon, simply that ensuring that there is some alignment between the CCSDS as a standards organization and the IETF as a standards organization is valuable. Because again, the CCSDS organization, for those who are not aware, is the organization used by the space agencies to standardize what the space agencies will be doing, which seems like something to pay attention to when we're talking about space systems.
And to that note, we have an official liaison between the IETF and the CCSDS. We meet, chairs here, we meet once a month. We try and align things such as not holding a CCSDS meeting and an IETF meeting simultaneously, which is happening. Yeah. So we're starting to solve the simple things like that. And then we're going to make sure we get a bit more alignment. But there is constant informal discussion as well as an official liaison.
Indeed. All right, so we are now 1 minute over. Thank you so much for everyone who presented and for everyone who brought technical content to the meeting. Much appreciated. See you all at 1:21.
Yes, double it. Here we go. Thank you, guys.
Sometimes the mics will have like